Laughed at in the marketplace. The alien marketplace was loud and full of voices. Traders shouted prices. Shoppers argued. Dust floated in the air, hot and dry under the twin suns. But in the middle of it all, behind thick iron bars, stood a tall alien woman, Kalira. She was not just tall. She was huge. Strong muscles, deep purple skin, and silver eyes. Her hair was tied back in thick braids that hung like ropes. Even her chains looked small on her. Around her neck a tag read, "Property for sale." People walked by. Some stared, some laughed. Too big. Who would want that beast? She'll crush your house if she sits. Kalira didn't move. She stared forward, not looking at anyone. Her face showed no emotion, but inside her heart, she was breaking again. 17 times. That's how many buyers had rejected her. 17 times she was led forward, made to kneel, to be judged. Every time the answer was the same. Too big, too scary, too dangerous. Not beautiful enough. Kalira once had a name that meant something. She once lived with a tribe that respected strength. But after her homeworld fell in war, she was captured and sold like cattle. Her value was only in how much someone was willing to pay for her, and no one wanted her. The trader beside her, a greasy alien with yellow eyes, barked at the crowd. "Strongest one I got, can lift a cargo truck, obeys orders, built for labor or protection." But still, no interest. A small group of alien nobles passed by. One noble woman looked at Kalira and wrinkled her nose. "Disgusting. Looks like she eats metal." The others laughed. Kalira turned her face slightly to the side. She didn't want them to see her tears. Suddenly the crowd shifted. A human man stepped into the dusty lane. He wasn't tall. He wasn't armed. He wore a simple shirt, leather boots, and a worn-out jacket. A cap hid part of his face. He carried no weapon. He didn't speak. He just stood still, looking straight at Kalira. The trader noticed and rushed to him. "You there, human, you have a good eye, strongest slave in the market. Special discount just for you." The man didn't answer. His eyes were locked on Kalira. Not with fear, not with mockery. Just calm. Kalira blinked. She had seen many eyes in her life. Greedy ones, hateful ones, scared ones. But never eyes like his. His gaze was quiet. "Curious, kind?" The trader leaned in. "You can use her for defense. Or farming. Or just to scare your enemies. Look at those arms. She can tear metal." Still, the man said nothing. Finally, he spoke in a low voice. "What's her name?" The trader laughed. "You want to name a slave? Ha! We call her Beast 17. 17 rejections. She's a legend now." Kalira's jaw clenched. Shame burned in her chest, but the man stepped closer to the bars. "Do you have a name?" he asked her directly. For a moment, Kalira couldn't speak. No one had asked her that since she was captured. No one cared. She stared at him. "Kalira," she whispered. The man nodded slowly. "That's a good name." The trader looked annoyed. "So? You want her or not?" The man reached into his jacket and pulled out a heavy pouch. It jingled with coins. "I'll take her." The crowd froze. Whispers spread like wildfire. "He bought her? Why? She's too big. She's a freak." The trader grinned, wide. Good choice, you won't regret it." He quickly unlocked the cage and placed a scanner on the man's wrist to record the purchase. Kalira didn't move. She looked down at the human man. "Why?" she asked softly. "You are not afraid of me?" The man looked up at her. "Should I be?" She hesitated. "I've broken walls, hurt people." He nodded. Maybe they deserved it. Kalira's eyes widened a little. This man was strange. The trader tossed her chains at the man. "She's all yours now, enjoy." But the man didn't take the chains. He tossed them aside. He looked at Kalira and said, "Let's go." Kalira stepped forward, slow and unsure. No chain, no force, just a choice. As they walked away, the crowd watched in silence. No one laughed this time. Kalira walked behind the human through the narrow, sun-baked streets. Her large feet made soft thuds against the sand, but no one dared step in her path now. The chains were gone, the bars were behind her. But still, she felt like a prisoner in her own skin. She watched the man ahead. He didn't speak. He didn't glance back. His movements were calm, steady. The wind picked up dust, blowing it across the broken buildings and metal stalls. Kalira kept walking. No one had ever looked at her the way he did. Not with hunger, not with fear, not with disgust. Just stillness. His name, she learned, was Lucas. He didn't ask her to carry his things. He didn't order her around like the slave masters had. Instead, he walked to a small transport parked outside the market, a rusted hover wagon with patched engines and scratched paint. It looked just as tired as she felt. Lucas climbed in, pressed a few buttons, and the vehicle hummed to life. He looked over his shoulder. "You coming?" Kalira hesitated. No chains, no command. "Where are you taking me?" she asked. "Home," he said simply. She climbed in, her heavy frame making the vehicle groan slightly. Lucas didn't comment. He just adjusted the seat and took off. They drove in silence across the barren desert. The sky above was painted in fading orange light, and the twin suns were dipping behind the hills. The wind howled, but inside the transport it was quiet. Uncomfortable, but not cruel. After some time, Kalira spoke, her voice rough. "Why did you buy me?" Lucas kept his eyes on the path ahead, because no one else saw what I did. She turned her head slightly. "And what did you see?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "A soul." Kalira looked away quickly. Her heart beat faster, confused by his answer. Was this a trick? Another lie? Was he playing with her? They reached a small cabin built into the side of a canyon. It was old but clean, surrounded by small crops, a storage shed, and a wind turbine that squeaked as it turned. Lights flickered on as Lucas stepped out and motioned toward the door. "Come in. There's food inside." She followed him slowly. She was used to cages, to stone floors, to the taste of metal. But when the door opened, warm light spilled out. Inside was a simple home, a table, 2 chairs, shelves filled with tools and old books, a sleeping mat, a heater, and the smell of cooked grain and dried fruit. Lucas pointed to the corner. "You can sleep there, you're not my prisoner." Kalira blinked. "I don't understand." "I didn't buy a slave," he said. "I freed someone." She sat down slowly. Her body didn't know how to relax. Her muscles stayed tense, waiting for pain. But none came. Lucas placed a plate of food in front of her. Steam rose from it. Real food. Not scraps. She stared at it, unsure. Lucas sat across from her and ate quietly, not watching her like others did. After a long pause, she picked up the spoon and took a small bite. Her hands trembled. It was soft, sweet, warm. She didn't know food could feel like this. For a moment, she forgot the market, the laughs, the rejections. Lucas broke the silence. 17? She nodded slowly. 17 buyers said no. One said I looked like a monster. One said I wouldn't fit in his house. One tried to poke me with a stick to see if I'd roar. Lucas chuckled. "Did you?" She looked at him and smiled for the first time. Just a little. "No, I wanted to." They sat in quiet again, but this time it wasn't heavy. Kalira glanced at the window. Stars were starting to appear in the night sky. Lucas stood up and said, "You're safe here. You sleep. Tomorrow we'll talk. More." She looked up at him. "What if I leave in the night?" He paused at the doorway. "Then I hope the stars guide your steps." That answer made no sense to her. No master had ever cared if she stayed or left. She lay on the mat, not knowing if her eyes would close. But as her head rested on the soft pillow, her body began to relax. Something in this home, in this man's voice, felt different. No shouting, no chains, just stillness. Outside, the wind whispered through the canyon. Inside, Kalira slept without fear for the first time in years. And in the next room, Lucas stared out the window, his mind on the woman everyone had laughed at. He didn't walk away. He saw her, and tomorrow, she would start to see herself again too. Morning light crept through the wooden shutters of the small canyon cabin. The wind outside was calm for once, whispering gently instead of roaring. Kalira slowly opened her eyes, unsure for a moment where she was. The soft mat under her, the warmth in the air, the smell of cooked roots, it didn't feel real, but it was. She sat up and looked around. The room was quiet. No guards, no cages, no shouting voices. Just peace. Then she heard the soft clanking of metal from outside. Kalira stepped out of the cabin. Her feet touched the cool sand, and for a moment she just stood there, breathing in the morning air. It was different. It didn't smell of filth or chains, it smelled free. She followed the sound to the edge of the canyon where Lucas was working. He was repairing a fence made of scrap metal and wood, using old tools and steady hands. He didn't look up when she came near. "You slept?" he said calmly. Kalira nodded. "I did." Lucas wiped sweat from his brow. "That's good." Kalira watched him work for a moment, confused. No orders, no commands. He didn't treat her like a servant or a danger, he just treated her like someone standing beside him. "You built this place yourself?" she asked quietly. "Mostly," Lucas replied. "Piece by piece. Took years. Got a water tank over the ridge, solar heat panels out back. Everything else, I trade or fix." Kalira looked around. The cabin wasn't fancy, but it was strong, clean, safe. It stood proud against the harsh canyon winds, just like the man who owned it. "Why do you live here?" she asked. Lucas shrugged. "Too many people in the cities. Too many lies. Out. Here I can breathe." Kalira nodded. She understood that feeling. The cities were full of cold metal and cruel words. Here, the silence almost felt like kindness. Lucas turned to her. "You know how to fix a fence?" Kalira hesitated. "I know how to break them." He chuckled. "That's a start." He handed her a metal rod. It was strange, working beside a human. Stranger still that he didn't watch her every move, like she might snap. He simply trusted her. Bit by bit, they worked in rhythm, patching the old fence and rebuilding what the storms had broken. Later, they sat under a rocky ledge for shade. Lucas passed her a flask of water. She took it, drank deeply, then handed it back. "You didn't ask where I'm from," she said softly. Lucas shook his head. "You'll tell me when you want to." Kalira looked down. "My planet was called Surnakai. We were known for strength, our women were warriors, proud, respected, but after the war we became property. I was captured when I tried to protect my younger brother." Her voice cracked at the last word. Lucas didn't say anything. He just listened. "They took him," she whispered. "I never saw him again." The wind grew still. Her pain hung in the air like a wound that hadn't healed in years. "I'm sorry," Lucas said. His voice wasn't empty. It carried weight. Kalira nodded, biting her lip. "You're the first person to say that." They sat in silence for a while. Not the kind that feels awkward, but the kind that understands. As the sun lowered, Lucas stood. "Come on, I need to check the water pump." They walked together across the rocky trail. The canyon stretched wide on both sides, beautiful in its own wild way. Kalira felt something inside her begin to shift. This place, this broken cabin, this quiet man, it was becoming something she hadn't had in years. A home. When they reached the pump, Lucas bent down and adjusted a valve. Water sputtered up from the ground, clear and cold. Kalira knelt beside it and cupped her hands. She drank slowly, the cool liquid washing over her dry throat. Her fingers trembled, This is clean, she said in disbelief. So clean. Lucas nodded. Takes work to keep it that way. But it's worth it. Kalira stared into the water, her reflection rippling in the surface. Her silver eyes, once full of fire and rage, now showed something else. She didn't know the word for it, not yet. That night, back in the cabin, Lucas handed her a blanket. Kalira hesitated before taking it. You're strange for a human. Lucas raised an eyebrow. Because I didn't chain you? No, she said, shaking her head. Because you didn't ask anything from me. He looked at her for a moment, then said, You've given me something already. She blinked. What? Lucas smiled. Company. Kalira laid down slowly, clutching the blanket tight. She closed her eyes, and this time, there were no memories of chains or cages, only the sound of wind through the canyon and the quiet strength of a man who didn't walk away. The nights in the canyon were cold, not the kind of cold that made your skin shiver, but the kind that slipped into your bones silent and sharp. The wind howled between the rocks like a ghost with nowhere to go. Inside the small wooden cabin, Kalira was awake. She sat near the window, watching the stars, above. So many stars, stretching forever. Back on her homeworld, the stars meant stories, old legends of warrior women and lost kings. Now they only reminded her of what she had lost. She hugged her knees, quiet, thoughtful. Her large frame looked out of place in the small room, like a weapon laid gently in a child's bed. Yet she made no sound. Only her eyes moved. Behind her, Lucas stirred from his mat and sat up. You okay? He asked sleepily. Kalira didn't turn around. I can't sleep. Too cold? No. Too quiet. Lucas stood and pulled a blanket from the shelf, draping it around her shoulders. She flinched at first, then relaxed. You're not used to peace, are you? He asked. She shook her head. Peace doesn't feel real. Lucas sat beside her on the floor, both of them facing the stars. Sometimes the hardest thing is learning how to stop fighting. Kalira was silent for a long time. Then quietly she said, But what if fighting is all you have left? Lucas looked at her, but didn't answer right away. Instead, he said, Come with me tomorrow. There's something I want to show you. The next morning, the sun rose red and gold over the cliffs. Lucas packed a bag with water and tools. Kalira followed him without question, curiosity in her eyes. They walked for hours across dry hills and cracked stone paths. Birds flew overhead. Strange desert flowers bloomed between rocks. And still, Kalira stayed quiet. She moved with strength but grace, her steps heavy but sure. They reached a high ridge with a broken antenna tower standing at the edge. Below it, half buried in the sand, was a wrecked metal container. This is it, Lucas said, kneeling beside it. An old drop pod from the last war. Crashed here years ago. Kalira tilted her head. Why did you bring me here? Lucas pointed to the dented metal plate. Faded letters were still visible. She leaned closer. Her heart stopped. It was in her native language, Cernakai Defense Pod, Unit 12B. Her lips trembled. This is from my people. Lucas nodded. I found it when I first moved here. Inside was a shattered message device. I couldn't fix it. But maybe you can. Kalira knelt, running her fingers over the symbols. Her hands were large, strong, but gentle. Carefully, she opened the side panel. Wires hung loose. Burnt circuits and dust clogged the inside. Still, it was familiar. This model was used to send last calls for rescue, she whispered. Only warriors carried it. Lucas sat on a rock and watched her work. You know more than you let on. Kalira didn't look up. They said I was a beast, a monster, but I was a captain once. I led others. I fought for them. Lucas smiled softly. And you still would. She looked at him confused. You stood between me and that sand beast 3 days ago, he said. You didn't run. You didn't hide. You fought like you had something to protect. Kalira's eyes softened. I didn't even think. My body just moved. That's called loyalty, Lucas said. She was quiet again, gently reconnecting two wires. The pod suddenly blinked to life. A dim blue screen lit up. Kalira gasped. A shaky message played in her native tongue. Kalira, if you find this, run. They took the children. They came for our blood. Then static. Kalira closed the pod slowly. Her breath was shallow. Her hands shook. Lucas touched her arm gently. You okay? She nodded, though her voice cracked. That voice. That was my brother. A single tear rolled down her cheek. Lucas said nothing, but in that moment Kalira did something she hadn't done in years. She leaned into him. Her large form trembled as she cried quietly into his shoulder. She didn't care if he saw her weakness. She didn't care if she looked broken, because in this place she was finally allowed to be more than muscle. She could be human too. That night, as they returned to the cabin, Kalira walked taller. The stars were still the same, but now they held hope. Lucas gave her a nod. You didn't just fix a machine today, you found a piece of yourself. Kalira looked at him, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Thank you. And for the first time she smiled wide, not because someone accepted her, but because maybe she was learning to accept herself. The days passed gently in the canyon. The winds came and went, the sun burned high, and the stars returned each night like old friends. Kalira no longer counted time in pain or rejection. Her heart, once heavy like stone, now beat with quiet wonder. She helped Lucas every day now. She lifted fallen beams, repaired walls, fetched water from the deep pump, and even learned to cook simple human food. Her hands, built for battle, now chopped roots and washed dishes. It felt strange, but good. One morning, as the sun rose over the cliffs, Kalira stood outside the cabin, watching the golden light spread over the rocks. A small smile touched her lips. Behind her, Lucas stepped out, carrying a steaming mug. Coffee, he said simply, handing it to her. Kalira took it with both hands. The warmth settled into her fingers. She had grown used to his quiet ways. He didn't speak often, but when he did, it mattered. They drank side by side, saying nothing for a while. Then Kalira broke the silence. You know, I used to dream about being chosen. Back when I was still in the cages, not just bought, chosen. Lucas looked at her. There's a difference. She nodded. Being bought means someone owns you. Being chosen means someone sees you, wants you, even with the cracks. Lucas looked out at the rising sun. I think you were always waiting for someone to see past the armor. Kalira tilted her head. Did you? He gave a small smile. Maybe I was waiting for someone strong enough to break through mine. Kalira chuckled softly. You? Armor? You're the calmest human I've ever met. Lucas nodded. Yeah, but calm doesn't mean unbroken. Kalira looked at him carefully now. She had seen scars on his hands, quiet pain in his eyes. But he never spoke about his past. He carried it like a stone in his pocket, heavy, hidden, but always there. Why did you really choose me? She asked at last. Lucas set his mug down and looked her in the eyes. Because everyone else saw a beast. I saw a beginning. Kalira's breath caught. No one had ever said something like that to her, not even her old commanders. A beginning? She turned away quickly, afraid her face would show too much. But Lucas didn't press her. He just picked up a few tools from the table. I have to repair the crop irrigation. Want to come? She nodded. That afternoon, they worked together in the fields. Lucas crawled under pipes while Kalira held large parts steady. The sun was harsh, and dust clung to their skin. But Kalira didn't complain. Every drop of sweat reminded her that she wasn't locked in a cage. She was free. When the repairs were done, they both lay back on the dry grass, panting, laughing. Lucas turned his head toward her. Do you ever think about leaving this place? Kalira stared up at the sky. Sometimes, but I don't feel the need to run anymore. Lucas nodded. Good. She turned to face him, her expression soft. Would it bother you if I stayed? He sat up and looked at her with calm, honest eyes. Kalira, he said, you were rejected 17 times by people who didn't deserve you, but I'm not the 18th buyer. I'm the 18th choice, and I'm choosing you. Her heart skipped. He stood slowly and reached into his pocket. I don't have a ring, he said with a little shrug. But I made this. He held out a small wooden carving, rough but beautiful. It was a symbol from her culture shaped carefully by his hands, a sign of unity, of respect. Kalira stared at it, her throat tight. You made this for me? She whispered. He nodded. It's not perfect, but I wanted you to know. I see you. All of you. She took the carving with shaking fingers, a simple token. But to her, it was more precious than gold. Then, for the first time, she made a choice. Kalira stepped forward, placed the carving over her heart, and gently took Lucas's hand. I've been strong for so long, she said, but now I want to be safe. I want to stay. Not because I have nowhere else, but because I have somewhere worth staying. Lucas pulled her close, no fear in his touch, and she leaned into him, not as a warrior, not as a weapon, but as a woman finally free to love. In that quiet moment under the canyon sun, the rejected became chosen, and the broken became whole. The sky above the canyon was soft with clouds, rare and slow-moving. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of blooming cactus flowers. Inside the cabin, Kalira stood by the window, her large hands brushing across the smooth carving Lucas had given her. She wore it on a string around her neck now. Every time she touched it, something inside her softened. For the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged somewhere, not as a soldier, not as a slave, not as a tool, but as a person. Lucas was outside, fixing a broken wheel on the wagon. His shirt was rolled at the sleeves, arms dirty with grease. Kalira watched him quietly. He worked with such peace, such focus. There was strength in him, not the loud kind, but the quiet kind, the kind that didn't break others to feel strong. She stepped outside and walked toward him. Lucas looked up and smiled. You're up early. I couldn't sleep, she said. Too many thoughts. He nodded and wiped his hands on a rag. Want to talk about them? Kalira hesitated. She was still learning how to speak from the heart. On her world, feelings were hidden, weakness was punished, but here, with Lucas, it felt safe to try. Do you remember the night you bought me? She asked. Lucas looked at her gently. Of course. You didn't look away, she said. You didn't see a problem. You saw a beginning. I did. Kalira looked down at the soil. You never chained me, never asked for anything. You gave me space and food and warmth, and now I ask myself something every morning. Lucas stepped closer. What's that? What would happen if I never left? Lucas was quiet for a moment. Then he said softly, that would make me very happy. She lifted her eyes to his. Then tell me, she whispered, if I stay, what would I be to you? Lucas didn't answer with words right away. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a tiny pouch, and opened it slowly. Inside was a band made of 2 pieces of metal, worn, simple, but shaped into a perfect circle. Around it he had wrapped a thread of her hair, just one silvery strand glowing in the sunlight. I made this, he said. It's not jewelry. It's not for show. It's a promise. Kalira's breath caught. Lucas stepped forward and gently held out the ring. You were never meant to be owned, he said. You were meant to be loved. And if you'll have me, not as your master, not even as your rescuer, but just as your partner, I want to walk beside you for the rest of my days. Tears welled in Kalira's eyes. Her hands trembled. This wasn't a command. It wasn't a demand. It was the first real proposal she had ever received, and it came with no chains. She slowly took the ring and held it close. "My people don't believe in rings," she said softly. "We believe in oaths spoken under the open sky." Lucas nodded. "Then let's speak them now." They stood in silence, the wind moving gently around them, as if the world itself had paused to listen. Kalira placed her hand over her chest. "I was once a weapon," she said. "Made to fight, trained to destroy. But now, I want to build. I want to feel peace beside you. I choose you, Lucas. Not because I owe you, but because I see you." Lucas stepped forward, placing his hand over hers. "I've lived alone for too long," he said. "I built these walls to keep the world out. But you walked in unafraid and reminded me how to feel. I choose you, Kalira, not for your strength, but for your heart." Their foreheads touched gently. No ceremony, no crowd, just two souls. Bound not by law, not by duty, but by choice. That night they sat by the fire, arms wrapped around each other. Kalira's head rested on Lucas's shoulder. The fire cracked quietly, throwing soft light over their faces. She whispered, "I used to think love was weakness." Lucas smiled. "And now?" Kalira looked up at him, eyes shining. "Now I know it's the only thing stronger than fear." The sun rose slowly over the canyon, spilling light like gold across the rocks and soil. The wind was soft that morning, like even the world itself knew something had changed. Inside the small cabin, Kalira opened her eyes, not to chains, not to fear, but to the warmth of a hand holding hers. Lucas was still asleep beside her, his breathing steady and calm. Kalira watched him in silence for a moment. There had been times in her life when she thought love was only for others, that she was too broken, too big, too much. But this human, this quiet man, had chosen her with full heart and open hands. She was no longer a weapon. She was a wife now. The thought made her chest ache in a beautiful way. The village below the canyon had heard rumors. A human man had married a Cernikai giant. Whispers spread like fire. Some came to stare. Others came to judge. But one day, an old alien trader dared speak to Lucas in the market. "You married that thing?" He spat. "That war relic?" Kalira, who was standing just a few feet away, turned. But before she could react, Lucas stepped between them. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't swing his fists. He simply said, "That thing is my wife. Speak again and you'll answer to me." The trader backed away, speechless. Kalira watched, stunned. Not because he defended her. Others had tried to do that with weapons, but because he had done it with pride. No shame, no hesitation. She was his wife, and he said it like it was the greatest truth in the world. That night she kissed his hands as they sat by the fire. "You didn't need to speak for me," she said. Lucas smiled. "I didn't speak for you. I spoke because I'm proud." Kalira had been feared for her strength all her life. But now, she was loved for her soul. Days turned into weeks. The cabin became more than wood and stone. It became a home. Together they repaired the roof, planted vegetables, and built a second room. Kalira painted symbols from her world on the outer wall, the mark of peace, the sign of a warrior's honor, and one more, the symbol for love, chosen freely. When Siu, travelers passed through the canyon. They often stopped at the cabin, curious. Some were afraid when they saw her. But once they saw how she laughed at Lucas's terrible jokes or how she gently wrapped injured birds in soft cloth, they realized she wasn't a monster. She was something much harder to find. She was kind. One afternoon, a merchant caravan stopped by, asking for water. Kalira stepped outside, towering over them. They froze, but Lucas simply waved and said, "This is my wife. She won't bite." The aliens chuckled nervously. Kalira raised an eyebrow. "Not unless they steal your tools again." Everyone laughed. The fear faded. That night, Lucas leaned against the cabin with Kalira by his side. "You're changing how people see you." Kalira smiled softly. No, I think I'm finally showing who I really am. Lucas reached up and touched the wooden symbol still hanging from her neck. You were always that person, he whispered. Then one evening a letter arrived, a small package dropped by an old messenger bot. Kalira opened it and found a photograph. It was blurry but clear enough, her brother's face older, alive, and smiling. The message was short. I found shelter. I'm safe. And I never stopped hoping you were too. Kalira dropped to her knees, clutching the photo. Lucas came to her side and wrapped his arms around her. I have family, she whispered. I'm not the last. He kissed the top of her head. You've always had family. You just didn't know it yet. And so the warrior who had been rejected 17 times, who had been called too large, too wild, too unwanted, now stood taller than ever, not because of her size, but because she was no longer alone. She was loved. She was safe. She was someone's wife. And when people told stories of the tall alien woman who once crushed steel and broke chains, they also spoke of how she once carried a lost child through a dust storm, or how she gave her food to a starving traveler, or how her laugh could echo through the rocks like thunder, soft, warm thunder. She had not been chosen for her strength. She had been chosen for her heart, and she would never be rejected again.